focus on psychological constructs, research, and theories that help us better understand how we may be able to reduce prejudice against people with disabilities within ourselves and our communities, whether that's the church, school, or neighborhoods. At the end of our time together, you should be able to respond to the question, what have Alport and Euchre, Block and Young, and other psychological researchers discovered about what types of contact actually reduces prejudice against people with disabilities? Are the churches inclusive? Ellen Stumbo, a blogger and a parent of a child with a disability, shares some parent comments that were shared with her. My child is not welcomed in any of the children's activities. They said he is too disruptive. I took my child to Sunday school class, but they wheeled him to the corner and he sat there until I came to pick him up. I asked the pastor if we could possibly have someone help my child during Sunday school. They told me they were not responsible to find me babysitters. When my child is loud, people stare at us and shake their heads. I even had people tell me that my child needs discipline. My child has autism and they know that. I'm not going back. My child is welcomed, but almost every Sunday they call me and I have to go get her from her class. Why bother? For 20 years, my wife and I took turns going to church. One Sunday she would go and I stayed home with our son. The next one we switched. Nearly half in alt studies shared that they had not participated in a church service because their child was not included. And according to Carter and the National Organization on Disability, who have been doing several studies in this area, few parents of children with disabilities and adults with disabilities attend church due to inaccessibility, just in getting into the church or in the inaccessible programs and activities offered. Students with disabilities in K-12 and college settings and workplaces also feel isolated and not included, at least in an authentic way. The power we place on normalcy and not accepting one's differences diminishes community. As Hauerwas states, the demand to be normal can be tyrannical unless we understand that the normal condition of our being together is that we are all different. Although the field of psychology labels differences and in the process can bring stigma to the individual, the field has numerous pieces of evidences of the diversity of humans. Differences among each other is not less than. Another psychological assumption is that we will struggle to accept one another without acceptance of ourselves. As Moltzman suggests, one can only accept another person when one has first freed oneself of everything that oppresses and estranges, everything that makes oneself look small, ugly, and worthless in one's own eyes. To accept one another presupposes that we have found our independence, our worth, our self-confidence, and that we therefore act out of a sense of freedom and gift each other with freedom through mutual acceptance. Only she who has found herself can accept other people without oppressing them or becoming a burden to them. Psychological research also asserts that our implicit biases and assumptions, mostly unconscious, may affect our perceptions and consequently attitudes towards others. Across 18 studies of a meta-analysis, moderate to strong negative implicit attitudes towards people with physical disabilities were found. But there was no association between explicit and implicit attitudes. Another meta-analysis of implicit research revealed that children preferred other children without disabilities as compared to children with physical or intellectual disabilities. Huckstadt and Schutz found that participants preferred pictures of typically developing children over children in wheelchairs and did not prefer children who were described with disabilities over those who were described with mildly negative facts. Researchers also paired an assistance dog to the image of a person with a disability, and participants demonstrated a significantly more positive implicit association to that image than to the image of a person with a disability alone. The assistance dog was described by the researchers as a possible social lubricant to acceptance of people with disabilities. This clearly illustrates the stigmatization of those with disabilities. And in my mind, is a dog more valuable and a positive construct than one with a disability made in the image of Christ? The type of contact with others different from ourselves builds authentic relationships that recognize that people of faith with and without disabilities are more alike than not. Alport's classic intergroup theory research initially suggested that increased contact should lead to reduced prejudice to an outgroup, but this has not been borne out in the research across the decades. Certain conditions need to exist with this contact to actually decrease prejudice and implicit and explicit bias. Euchre, Block, and Young found that to build authentic relationships with individuals with disabilities and reduce prejudice and ableism, 4 conditions needed to be satisfied. The first is that there should be equal status relationship. The second condition should be natural contact. It shouldn't be forced. The third condition is that we should view the individual with a disability as someone to ward off negative stereotypes. And the last condition is that both individuals should be working towards shared goals. More recent research has noted the importance of the type of contact. And again, it echoes some of Euchre's research, voluntary versus involuntary, intimate versus superficial, in one's home, between individuals with and without disabilities, that actually leads to reduced prejudice. Keith, Benetto, and Roge had a study of over 550 participants, and they were looking at the type of contact with those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what they found is that the higher quality of contact predicted lower intergroup anxiety, which in turn predicted lower levels of exclusion. Similarly, the quality of contact predicted stronger, positive, implicit attitudes towards those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which in turn predicted lower levels of exclusion attitudes. They also found that if you just increased the contact, if it wasn't high quality, it didn't decrease the prejudice, and at times increased it. So type of contact is key. Examples of the questions assessing quality of contact included, did they have informal talks with individuals with intellectual disabilities and had visits to their homes, as well as a series of questions that assessed the kind of tone of their interactions. Were the conversations perceived as cooperative or competitive? Were they intimate or superficial? And were they, again, voluntary or involuntary? Other research has demonstrated that informed contact is critical. Interestingly, in 2000, the National Organization on Disability, or NOD, began a campaign to increase congregational accessibility in our churches. Almato et al. Found that even though churches joined primarily to increase physical accessibility, most members experienced increased knowledge, acceptance, and relationships after thinking through what are these needed areas of accessibility. Starting at basic physical accessibility can lead to increased awareness of disability etiquette, other areas of accessibility, programmatic and attitudinal areas, and it can encourage members to reach out to others with differences. How we respond to people with disabilities appears to be based partially upon our implicit and explicit assumptions, our education, and types of shared experiences or lack thereof we have had with people with disabilities. The body of Christ is incomplete without those with disabilities. As Hauerwas states, if we are to be a good community, we must be one that has convictions substantive enough not to fear our differences, and indeed to see that we would not be whole without the other being different from us. In Ephesians 4:16, Paul again brings back the importance of unity and completeness within the body of believers, and the importance of each member when he says, he makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Paul seems to intimate that we cannot grow spiritually and healthily as a church and as a community without a complete, diverse family of faith believers that truly accept one another and grow together, recognizing our shared vulnerabilities and humility, but confident that Christ accepts us completely, not based on anything that believers can humanly orchestrate.